Hey, Paula.
Hey, back. All right. To reiterate what Winston just said, welcome again to everybody on this Sunday afternoon. I know there are a lot of things happening, and for you to take the time to come and sit in the space with us, believe you me, it is really appreciated, and we both thank you for that. All right. So now, Laura, let me ask you a question. How was the collaboration for you?
The collaboration was good. I didn't know where it was going to go at first, but as you reminded me, we've always been collaborating through our conversations. Paula and I, we do converse a lot on different things, but in particular, my love for history and the fact that Paula has a love for many things and where her studies in her PhD program has led her. So we've been having a lot of conversations around the colonial experience, enslavement, and I think when we were asked by Katrina, that is, to be a part of this project, I think it just naturally, even without us saying it, that is going to be this theme, that our ideas and our thoughts, you know, centered on one basic theme. So for me, it was good. It was great working with Paula. I've never worked in this kind of way before. I really respect Paula Daley, Miss Daley, and you know her experience and expertise, and just the range of medium that she works with and in. Paula, as you heard, has straddled sculpture, painting, printmaking, jewelry making. And of course, is an educator. So it was really great working with her. I think I have one of your pieces from my time as a student at Edna Manley College, a print piece. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a good challenge. I always say that Winston and Katrina stretch me because I tell them I'm not an artist, right? And so when they invite me to participate in their exhibitions, it's always a dig deep and stretching myself. And I really enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoy the collaboration with Paula. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How was it for you?
Now, it's interesting. And if you want, looking at the bigger picture and putting it in context, Laura and I were students together at art school. So it has been a journey. It has been a passage of time for us. And we've always had this conversation around enslavement. So I think in a lot of ways, we were kind of collaborating in a very sort of unconscious way based on the conversations that we kept having. And one of the interesting things about collaboration is that there has to be a level of trust. Right? Trust in the sense of not to let the ego take over. Trust that the other person knows what they're doing and you respect their process and likewise. And that how you come together in order to create this fusion to produce the final work. Right? Now, I've always sort of liked the delicacy of Laura's work. And Laura is the first one. One of the things I kid her about all the time, she likes to get up and say, but I'm not an artist. Right? But just the delicate nature of what she does in terms of the use of fibers. Right? And for me, the involvement of the hand is very, very important because for me, in my process, the involvement of the hand becomes, for me, my ritual. Right? What happens when I touch the materials, when I cut, I shape, I glue, I weld? It is about that movement of that hand, the importance of that hand. And the fact that every time you touch something, you leave a little part of yourself behind. Yeah. So I was excited about this collaboration, right? And I'm thinking, I wonder what Laura's coming with, right? How are we going to find a way to fuse what we're doing, right? How are we going to elevate the conversation now to the level where it becomes manifest within our space, So, yeah. And I think when I say so and I pause, I'm also thinking of Katrina's and Winston's involvement in terms of shepherding us through that process. I think that was very, very important.
Yeah.
Right? There were times we had deadlines to meet. They wanted to see what we were doing, just to, in a way, almost allow us to see the freedom, but to provide oversight as well, and see that we were respecting each other's process.
Right.
So in that regard, I really appreciated their level of involvement in terms of handling us.
I want to go back to the point about collaboration. So I know the initial conversation about this project and where it started and how different artists viewed the idea of collaboration. I think from the get-go, Paula and I had a different approach to the idea of collaboration in terms of not necessarily physically touching the other person's work, but in terms of the theme and how we're interpreting and seeking to present that theme through a body of work that's going to be pulled together, two separate artists. And I think one of the good things about this for us was that it was an installation. So it probably made it seem a little easier to pull these two different individual approaches to art making into a space that worked. And so for us, the theme was the overarching thing about collaboration and the conversations that we're having. And then allowing ourselves to still be independent artists, presenting your independent ideas around this theme. And then now coming into the space and actually seeing it come together seamlessly. I think when we came in to set up, we didn't start this process thinking that it was going to be an installation, We didn't say it's going to be an installation. No. We were thrown a challenge. We were put together to work together. And for me, at least, it was process-driven. Yeah? And then we met. We had that conversation up on campus, and we saw space. And then ideas started to flow, and we brought pieces of the work that we were working on together in a space up at UWI. And then we said, And then that is when the whole idea of, well, this is going to be an installation. And I think it challenged the curators a bit, because now it was like, this work, the idea for the work is growing. Where are we going to put this? And I think everything aligned. The universe just, made everything manifest. Yeah. And it so happened that there was a perfect room to bring both our ideas together in a collaborative way. So it was even more powerful, the collaboration, as you're now putting the pieces together to now have a bigger conversation and to present to the viewers.
Yes. And the conversations that happened in that space, in the negotiation of the space and the negotiation of the work, that became of paramount importance. And I said, it takes me back again to trust, being able to trust the other person, right? And establishing that level of comfort in the co-creation of our work.
Yeah. Yes. So I want to ask you, Paula, when we came for setup, and as we put the different objects in the space, and then the ideas about the sand and things started to come, was there any point where you felt that, I'm not sure if that piece is going to work, I'm not sure if Laura's piece is going to work with the, was there the anxiety you talk about? Was there any place where there was anxiety? I know I had a little anxiety at one point, and I'll share that in a bit.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You're looking at the elements, but you're also thinking, one, the expectations you have of yourself, the expectations you have of what the final work will be like. And there are moments when you second guess. You create these objects And it's all well and good when it's in your space, but the moment that they're taken out of the space and you're seeing them in another space, there are times when you begin to question, is this, do I need this? You know, should I include it? Should I leave it out? And you say, am I moving along the right path, but at the same time respecting the work enough to allow it to lead you? If I'm making any sense there in this process. And I would ask Laura, what you think? Yes, my area may be installation, but realizing that I don't have all the answers, right? It is not my work alone, it is our work. You know, so the anxiety was there, and also, will we be able to deliver?
Oh, yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. And then there's also that outside element of enjoying the process, because process is critical.
Right.
Sometimes the process is almost more important in a way than the end result, because the end result can be very sort of anticlimactic there, but the engagement in that process, you know. So yes, there were tense moments. I never had a doubt about Laura, because Laura was just, you know, very quiet and very methodical, and she's moving through the space and she's standing back, and because our space, we were in that space, but also it was sort of a very quiet space. It's almost like we were in each other's heads.
True, that's true.
You know, we moved something and the other one said, but that was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
So my anxiety, you've heard me say I'm not an artist, right? And they laugh at me when I say that. So just the pairing with Paula. Paula has done more exhibitions than I have done. So there is that, how do I match what Paula comes with all the experience that she comes with? And, you know, sometimes you self-doubt. Yeah, there's some of that. So for me, that was a big part of my anxiety. How do I match what Paula comes with? And will what I bring to the theme, even though we're sharing the same ideas, will it be, what's the word? Up to standard? On par? You know what I mean? So that was a kind of an individual thing, because as artists, we're not usually working collaboratively. You know, it's a very individualistic approach. And you have your own story that you're sharing. Now, in this project, you are literally, and I don't want to use the word forced, but you're working in a way where you have to now think about the other person. And so for me, that was some amount of anxiety. Another anxiety moment for me was the text that you will see inside the room. I was a bit anxious about that, because how will the audience receive that? Are we in a space where we want to see that kind of language so up in your face? You know, will it enhance the overall presentation of this body of work? Did it make sense? So I tell you, we put it up Saturday. Was it? No, Friday, I think it was. I can't remember.
The conversations before as to what to edit, what to, do we need to change this? Where would be the best place for it?
Yeah. So it goes up, and I think the following day, Kat calls me. I said, oh, Lord, it fell down. So I was like, okay, is this the universe saying that should not be in the space? You know what I mean? So that was another anxiety moment for me. But yeah, I guess comes with the territory.
You know, and it's interesting because for us it's a journey, but it's also the pairing of materials, the importance of material culture, right? I am not a fiber artist by no stretch of the imagination, right? And the things that I use in my work, but I believe that in the creation of the work, I had to pay respect to what Laura does, because it was very, very critical, right? And the whole thing of, if we're talking about enslavement, the bodies, the unclothed bodies, you know, how they were packed when they got to the New World, how they were adorned, you know, that element of the cloth becomes very symbolic. The threads that connect us, the threads that bind,
Right.
you know. So I felt that I really needed to have that in the work, regardless of whether it was in a limited way, but to pay ode to what she does.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right. And I may add to that, Paula. So Paula, in her practice, uses a lot of other objects. Yeah. And I think for me, it was an opportunity because I've seen several of your installations where there are other objects not made by the artist but are incorporated. And in some ways, I thought it was an opportunity to stretch myself a bit and venture into that. How do you incorporate these other objects, not necessarily everyday objects, into a conversation that looks so, it's a very, you know, heavy topic, theme, and how that comes into that. So even the name, break in case of emergency, there's a literalness to that, right? Because you'll see some objects in the space that can be broken, right? But that was also a bigger conversation about how I felt about certain things, and prodding and probing a question, is it now an emergency that we need to deal with certain things that we see in our society now that resonate from the colonial period, from the period of enslavement? And so, again, collaborating with Paula helped to just, you know, kind of put that in sharp focus and to stretch me to see how could you talk about that. Yes, your textiles base, but no, using other objects and elements.
And it's very important in terms of when you approach your work, each work that is created, it should stretch you, right? There should be that element of discomfort as you interrogate whatever topic it is that you're looking at. The moment that it becomes too comfortable, too familiar, I don't consider that a good thing, right? You must always be pushing, probing, stretching, because that is how you grow as an individual.
Yeah. Well.
Anybody want to answer? Jump in.
I know, right? Yeah. It's a conversation.
Yes.
What were we at to do? Oh.
Yes, there are 5 pairings.
Right.
Right? And Katrina and Winston asked us, they had this project, Hybridization, this is the last in a series of a bigger work. This is the culmination. And Katrina felt that it was very important to have artists who are paired with other artists outside of their discipline to come together. They can interpret the word collaboration however they see fit to create a work. So
that's what it was, you know.
Because as Laura mentioned, I mean, we don't necessarily collaborate all the time or feel the need to, or is necessarily comfortable collaborating with somebody else. That's why I say, one of the things I say, that trust is important. So, because when you're working like this, you cannot let the ego, right? And as artists, yes, we have our ego, take charge, because it is not about me, it's not about her, it is about us and the work. There has to be that intersectionality there.
So I hope that answers the question, Ms. Brooks. I hope that answers your question. Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Yes.
You want to go first? You go first.
All right. From where I'm coming from, and with my conversations with Laura, that thing of journey, that passage of time from one space to the next, and all the implications that go with it. And when you look at the period of enslavement, from the point of capture to the point of disembarkation in the new world, right? What that journey must have been like for these bodies, right? Seeing the way that they were packed physically in a space, I find traumatic enough, right? But you think about it in a way that, how does that then, that trauma, how does it affect the body? How does it imprint on the body? And you hear terms tossed around like psychic disarray, generational trauma. Do these things ever go away? And I don't think that they do, right? Such trauma cannot be forgotten at all, because that element is passed down, right? And because of the whole period of enslavement, it was not just about the journey, but what happened on the plantation.
Right.
What happened after the period of independence? What happens to us now in terms of we may not necessarily be physically shackled like our ancestors were, but we're still shackled in a modern sense by the other things, the trappings of contemporary society.
Right. And for me, I was really interrogating those trauma, emotions, ideas about identity and self, but really looking at it from the male perspective. So it's very deliberate that you're seeing male bodies in the space. And many things spurred my direction. One of them being, I think it was 2 years ago, the case is now in court. I think the man was convicted. That young lady that was murdered in Portmore. And my eldest daughter had a conversation with me about that whole incident. And one of the things she said to me is that she felt that, you know, young men, her peers, were being a bit hypocritical in terms of how they were responding to that whole scenario. So I asked her to expound on that. And she said, you know, because just the way in general that you find young men talk about women, those are some of the things that set the stage for the kind of murder, you know, and slaughtering of young girls and women. So it had me thinking, after that conversation with her, I remember as a student in art school, we were exposed to this article by Willie Lynch, and you saw an extract of it in the exhibition there. And it spoke about how to make a slave. So I immediately went searching for that article again to pull out things in that article that, as Paula just spoke about, you know, trauma and the legacy of that and how it continues through time. So I went to that article and I started to ask myself the question, is this kind of relationship between men and women, is that something that's coming, is there a vein that still holds from that enslavement period? Why is it so, why is there so much, I don't even know how to put the word, why is it so horrible? Why is it always ending? Why is this emotional trauma always ending or ends up a lot in some kind of murder or some kind of treatment that's unbecoming towards another? And I also started to think about my father and the stories he told me about as a 7-year-old child. You know, his mom gave him away, and she gave away his brother, and some other person raised them. So it's a lot of things that I was interrogating as we were tasked with doing a body of work. And as Paula and I, we converse about, enslavement, the colonial period, etc. Those are some of the things. There were questions that I was asking myself. And questions that I can't answer because I'm not a male. But I felt that I wanted this conversation to begin because most times, we say, oh, the man, them tough, man. Them supposed to tough. Them not to talk about that. We don't talk about it. We talk a lot about experiences that I am familiar with as a woman. But I don't hear much about the trauma, hurt, even pleasant emotions that men have and how they feel about, their engagement with their parents, their siblings. I have friends who talk about their engagement with their moms and they love their mom, but they feel that, my mother don't really love me like how she loved my brother because I remind her too much of my father. She looks at me and she sees my father. And so it was me interrogating all of that. And as I said, with the theme, looking at, is there, and it's a big question, is there a connection to that plantation experience, to the enslavement? And are these veins still carrying on today? And for me, it was a yes. Because you talk about, so what you're seeing in the exhibition is not only about trauma, but also about identity and, how they feel, feelings about self, feelings about attraction and desire, right? And when I'm doing my research, even some of the words, just read the words on the wall, the games that used to be played. There's a game that was called the jug game, where, in the taverns, and this is from the words of an enslaved person, they would have a jar and they filled it with ash. And for the enslaved, they would be in the taverns, the men, and they were now playing this game to see whose penis could reach the ash. So when I think about that, I'm thinking about, so these ideas about the big bamboo and the womb turner, and just how in our society today, this part of the body for the men is so important, not just to reproduce, but it's about identity. You know what I mean? And the other conversations that you'll hear around that. So for me, it's asking a lot of questions. I'm not seeking to provide all the answers, but I'm starting a conversation that we need to dig a little deeper. And as I said, it's weird because what does this girl know about that? But I can see it. And just last Sunday, we see the front page of the Gleaner again with the US student and his 19-year-old girlfriend, quote unquote. And then how he's relating to her. I mean, where does that really come from? So it's part of unpacking some of that narrative, and we really need to start, not talking around it. I think we've been talking around it a lot, but really talking about it. So that's me.
And I mean, when you look at this conversation, this whole thing of enslavement and all the offshoots of it, it's not a comfortable subject to discuss. Persons shy away from it. They feel very, very uncomfortable, right? So the whole thing of, we talk about identity, but the masking of identity or the performance of identity. Who are we, right? How do I see myself, right? How do I engage with the other person? Who is that person that I present to the world, right? How do I look at my own journey, my own, in a way, ancestral journey, what my ancestors went through to produce the product that I am now? So you really question the layers. You question the role of memory. You question the body as archive, right? You question the role of performance. How do you situate yourself in all of these conversations? How do you literally confront something that is so painful to deal with? When you read the lines of the words, how do you make a slave? To think that somebody actually sat down and crafted those words. And it's almost like a formula, the steps that you go through in order to create that individual. How do you relate to that? Do you see yourself as so far removed that you feel nothing when you read these words? Or you're so overcome with emotion that the only reason that is not me is because of this time. But maybe I'm undergoing the same type of trauma based on what is happening today. You know, so these are all the conversations that I have, right? And time and memory for me become very, very critical because memory is fickle, right? And we may all be in this room, and how we remember this event based on our own individuality is very, very different the moment we step outside of the space, right? So also the whole issue of space and what space connotes and how you negotiate space, right? And how you negotiate the power within that space all becomes critical to the conversation.
Yeah. When you said that, Paula.
What? Yes, go ahead.
Can you share more of your thought process
Yes.
Can you share more about these are already ready-made objects? Right? Talk about how you incorporate these already found objects with other images that see colonial images. Or I'm not sure what's inside. I'd love to hear more. I don't know if that's representative of the ash that you talked about. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay. All right. So where I started, I had an idea about, I know there was going to be male bodies because that's what I was looking at. This work for me is all process driven, right? I started with a few sketches, but as I started to collect materials and started to work with stuff, I allowed the process to just lead me along. Now, one of the things I was sure of was that I needed to capture parts of the body in a jar, in something, in a container. Because I was talking about that containment, and then the break in case of emergency was also driving, because I'm hammering home that we're in a crisis and something needs to be done. So it's almost like when you have the fire alarm or one of those things, and you say break in case of emergency. So there was that literalness about it. But the material, so I started, I think in 2021 when I did fiber, what was that one, Katrina? The first exhibition I did with fiber active germination, right? I was very interested in sculpting the fabrics, right? And so I was using gauze and cotton, things that, how do you sculpt that? So I still maintain that through this work where I'm sculpting fabric, but what would that be? What would those materials be? So I started with one medium, and then I moved on to using surgical bandage, right? The ash is clear. So I actually bought charcoal, light the fire pot outside, and burnt the ash because I wanted to do that too, right? And then there was sand. So looking at what Paula is talking about with the passage, and when the ships actually landed on the shore, it was not brown sand, right? So it had to be black sand. So we're talking about ports like Port Royal, black sand. So that is very significant, right? So the sand was deliberate, the ash is deliberate. They put in the bodies, so deforming the forms themselves. And no, so it was interesting trying to get the form in the jar, right? Because I literally had to know, deconstruct and force it into the jar, right? But still wanting it to represent what it represents. So for me, And of course the fibers, because that's my area of specialization, weaving. But you only see one woven piece. So all of these bodies are basically cast. Some of them are on actual bodies. Some of them have used a mannequin. But driven by the process. Just dived in and just allowed the process to guide me along.
Now, for me, I usually use objects or appropriated images. And one of the reasons why I am heavily drawn to working that way is that these images and objects, they come with a history. So, for instance, this clock happens to be my grand-uncle's clock, right? That I felt was very appropriate in terms of not just the age, but what that clock represented for him. And then removing the workings of the clock to present almost in a way, almost like a vitrine, these colonial images. Now the collage, the whole thing of cutting and pasting and rearranging and putting together, right? As I said, each of these images come with a history. But how do you now take these images to create a narrative that is your own? And that comes through the process of rearranging, manipulating, just looking at what they do and how they relate. For me, paper is another medium. I treat it very much in a way that I would treat paint or anything else. So I'm thinking of the colonial experience. I'm thinking of the time frame, because time is critical. It's ongoing, right? And almost trying to capture, like insects in amber, just slices of what would have happened during that particular time, right? For instance, if the image that forms a background for that heart, there's a painter, Joseph Bartholomew Kidd, who came to the Caribbean and painted these pastoral scenes. So this idyllic notion of what the tropics, is supposed to represent. But there's an other side to the tropics that was not necessarily seen. And it is a blood and sweat that is soaked into the soil, that is soaked into the surrounds. So it was very important to pull these images as opposed to something that was very contemporary. This was what I'm talking about. This is what I'm referencing. And all of these things help me now to build that narrative, right? And it's my way of interrogating not just materials, but the hard topic. The hard topic.